Welcome to the Motorsport.com F1 update from the Lusail paddock here in Qatar ahead of the Qatar Grand Prix. After the entire paddock, including myself, had quite an interesting trip coming from Vegas to here, the final push in the Middle East, starting today with a media day, of course, as always on Thursday, speaking to all 20 drivers ahead of the race weekend. And I have to say it's a media day that was quite dominated by the event in Vegas. Above all, by the double McLaren disqualification in Vegas late on Sunday night, but I have to say it was Saturday night. Basically, all F1 journalists, including myself, were waiting for 2 or 3 hours outside the McLaren hospitality area, waiting for a verdict, but even more because everyone knew what was going to happen. So even more waiting for Andrea Stella, the team principal, to show up and to give some more insight and explanation about how they could get it wrong like this. 15 minutes before the verdict, McLaren cancelled that media session, so that was quite telling about what was going to happen. But of course, that meant that today was basically the first opportunity to talk to all the team members about what exactly went wrong in Vegas. McLaren did put out a statement with Andrea Stella saying, well, above all, we had more unexpected porpoising. So they reject the idea of being too aggressive with the ride height. They say, okay, we even left some safety margin, but we had much more porpoising than ever before in this season. They are still investigating why, but that has been the main reason for the extra plank wear and therefore the disqualification. They also argued a little bit about the limited running in the dry, about shortened practice, of course, with the manhole cover. But as the FIA pointed out, technical regulations are black and white. So yes, all valid points why the race weekend became more complicated, but not valid points when it comes to the technical regulations. Andrea Stella did find the penalty itself a bit disproportionate, and he said that's something we want to talk about with the FIA. Some other teams smiled about that suggestion and said, well, it's black and white, so if you're over it, you're over it, and basically there's no reason to argue about that at all. The drivers themselves during the race were kind of aware that there was a potential issue. Of course, Lando was warned towards the end to do some more lift and coast to protect the skid blocks a bit more. Didn't help because Lando explained even with lift and coast, sometimes you get more porpoising. So even if they told him that earlier in the race, it would not have made any difference. When the verdict came, both drivers already left the track in Vegas, but of course they knew what was going to happen. And what was going to happen is bringing Max considerably closer in the championship fight. Only 24 points now between the three of them. But Lando emphasized today, nothing changes for us. Simply because we always saw Max Verstappen as a threat already when he was maybe 80 or 90 or after Zandvoort even 104 points behind. And we still have the same mindset now. So even if the mindset has changed, McLaren and Lando will of course never admit it on the record. But Lando saying nothing changes, which to some extent makes sense because for the first time ever in his Formula 1 career, Lando is on match point. Probably all the neutral F1 fans, and rightfully so, got a bit excited after Vegas and after the DSQ that maybe we will have a intense title decider in Abu Dhabi. But at the same time, we shouldn't forget the truth is if Lando simply scores 2 points more than Max and Oscar, it's already a done deal here in Qatar. So Lando for the first time ever on match point. Oscar Piastri is in a completely different position, and he, above all, wants to bounce back. Today in his media session, he talked a lot about the recent struggles with the McLaren car. The team have explained that most of those struggles are related to Oscar, his driving style in really low grip conditions. And if the theory is correct, then this weekend will be a really, really interesting one. Because, of course, Austin, Mexico was low grip because of altitude and high temperatures. Vegas was low grip because of really low temperatures. And this one should be more or less back to normal. And is, of course, the track where Oscar took his first sprint win. So he's looking to get some form back. The good news for him is that he's still allowed to chase the dream, as McLaren calls it. So to chase his own championship hopes. The team clarified today they will not use any team orders. They will not specifically choose Lando over Oscar this race weekend. And I think that's the only way to do it, because I remember a media lunch with Zach Brown in Austin. And back then he told us, well, as long as both drivers are within one race win, so within 25 championship points, there's basically nothing to choose. And back then that applied to Lando, because Lando was the one behind. But now exactly the same should apply to Oscar. and that's also what McLaren have confirmed today. That was also a topic in Max Verstappen, his media session. He was the last one to speak to the media today. And he got asked about the McLaren decision not to go for team orders. And Max smiled and said, well, that's absolutely perfect. So perfect for him. But also he agreed that it's basically the only way to deal with it for McLaren. Because Max said, if I were Oscar and if they would come to me and say, well, it's a pity for you, but now we're choosing Lando, so your title dream is over. Then Max said, I would have told them to F up. He didn't use the actual F word because he already got penalized for that once. But Max said, yeah, I would have told them to F up and probably not even show up anymore. Of course, Max is also quite smart in saying that because it might help a little bit in playing some mind games. But Verstappen himself was also, still quite relaxed. He said, okay, I'm closer now. I'm within one race win, but still we need more luck. Things have to go our way. And we basically need to win everything, and that might still not be enough. So he said, yes, the dream is to keep number one on the car also for next year. But if it's not going to happen, I will not cry. That was the quote that he gave us today. After Max, we should still talk about two other topics that were quite important in the build-up to this race weekend. The first one already came to the surface a little bit on Sunday night in Vegas. And that's Adrian Newey being promoted to the role of team principal next year at Aston Martin. Still some question marks inside the paddock, like how much of a really, really long-term solution is this? Or is it shorter term and are they still looking to bring someone in for that position? But at least for now, Fernando Alonso said it's a natural decision to make, a natural way of promoting Adrian. And Fernando smiled. He said, now we have two of the most successful individuals leading our team. And of course, he meant Lawrence Stroll and Adrian Newey. So he got the step up. I have to say some interesting clues already in the Vegas weekend, because I was talking to some Aston Martin team members and they invited me for the season launch next year. So for the 2026 car. And they said, well, there will be round tables with our drivers and also with Adrian. And I said also with Andy Cowell. And I had to basically ask it 3 times before getting an answer. And I said, yeah, also with Andy. Of course, Andy Cowell will still remain with the team, but he will be moved into a different role. It's interesting because especially the people you talk to in the paddock at Red Bull, they say, well, from our discussions, we never really knew that Adrian's ambition might have been to become a team principal one day. So it might be some natural progress at Aston Martin, but not necessarily what he was aiming for at Red Bull. Max also said, of course, the opportunity was not there at Red Bull, which is true. And he said it's also related to a recent trend in Formula One that more and more technical people get the step up and actually are quite successful in the new roles. If you look at Komatsu at Haas, of course, Stella at McLaren, and there are more, even within Red Bull with Laurent Mekies, and now Newey and at Aston Martin as well. Final topic, it's the other side of the camera, that's the Pirelli hospitality. And Pirelli also a topic of discussion because we do have the maximum stint linked back in Qatar. 25 laps per tire set, and per tire set is important because that includes the laps you do during qualifying and practice on that particular set. So if you have used a certain set in practice or qualifying, you are not allowed to do the full 25 laps during the race, but it's really 25 per set. And Pirelli said we count all laps. So we also count in laps, out laps, because if we start making some extra rules for it, it will just get too complicated, especially too complicated for the people at home. The main question is, how will that affect the racing this weekend? A couple of team bosses, including Ayo Komatsu, have told us that it will kill all the strategy options because, everyone is on the 2-stop. And he also thinks everyone will do more or less the same. So that's one way in which it affects the weekend. Another one is that it might take away some potential tire advantage. Still, Red Bull thinks that McLaren holds a tire advantage in higher temperatures. But the question is, okay, how useful is the tire advantage if you can only use a set for 25 laps? Of course, everyone will push a bit more than they used to do. So it will become more of a flat-out race. It was like that 2 years ago as well. Back then, it was not because of tire wear, by the way. That's good to clarify. It was because of the high curb stones, the pyramid curbs. Those curb stones have been changed and have been changed successfully last year. So that's not an issue anymore. But Pirelli, they have analyzed all the 2024 tires. And the construction just got really exposed. And they said to prevent that from happening in 25, we basically have to protect the teams from themselves and come up with the maximum stint length. So that will have an effect, not for the sprint, but it will have for the main race, a mandatory 2-stop race. Also an interesting one for F1 because it got postponed, but they're still thinking, okay, what effect would a potential, like a mandatory 2-stop have at all the races, not for 26, but maybe for 27. And this might be an interesting test case to see if actually all the teams will end up doing the same and will lead to a relatively boring race or not. That's something that we will find out during the weekend. First of all, of course, we will be back tomorrow to analyze everything that happened, not only in practice, but it's a sprint weekend, so also in sprint qualifying. So for now, thanks a lot for watching and see you tomorrow from the Qatar paddock.